which helped me realize that when people speak to each other, they don't necessarily understand each other, even if they speak, all of them speak English. I was seeing societal wrongs that I didn't like. We also succeeded quite a lot. But what we did, we changed people's paradigms.
Okay, welcome everyone to our first ever Gita My Journey to Impact session with our legendary Cecile. And what we will do here is we will first explore Cecile's journey to impact. So what is the moment, what led up to the moment of you understanding that there is something to do towards positive impact, and what was the turning point? And then maybe a little bit about what came afterwards. And if there are any questions from the potential audience, there are a few people potentially coming in, then we will ask them later. Okay, so with that, Cecile, what was your journey to impact, and what was the turning point? Where did that happen? What led up to it, and what came afterwards?
So, first of all, it's very embarrassing to be here, Thomas.
Why?
Because I'm not sure I have a story to tell that is so interesting, and also every individual has his or her own story, and I think people are inspired by things, but they're also pushed back by things. So it's always a mixed. I always have like mixed feelings around sharing all kinds of personal experiences because they're just mine. So you know, even when I try to give advice to people or startups or whatnot, I always say, look, this is just my thoughts.
Of course.
Take it with a very big grain of salt, because someone else might tell you a completely different story or a completely different understanding of reality, and you should just consider your take on it. So always with a grain of salt.
Absolutely. This is why we repeat this conversation with many members of Gita and of the Gita network, to show the broad variety of motivations and streams of life that happen towards impact, to be a source of inspiration for those who are yet finding that path. So okay,
so I don't think I can point to a sort of a aha moment or anything like that. I didn't have an epiphany, and I always think that life is complicated, and one thing leads to another, and you just take decisions, like micro decisions all the time, which eventually, some of them in retrospect influence your life more than others. You rarely know that in advance. Actually, I have a friend who's an ultra-Orthodox Jew, and he always says that even Moses, the biggest prophet of Judaism, didn't know that he was the biggest prophet of Judaism until after he died, or when he was very, very old. So it's, you do things in your life that resonate well with the decision you take at a given moment, given the information that you have, and then some things happen better or worse, and that's just how things happen. So that's why I'm saying that it's not necessarily a good lesson to learn.
That resonates. I don't have a concrete moment for myself, but we've had conversations since I was a little child, about topics that led me towards impact. And I remember that I was 10 or 11 when Chernobyl blew up, and that not only dates me now, but it gave me a real visceral understanding of the impact that we have as humans on this planet, because I couldn't eat the salad that was grown in our garden, or I couldn't play in the garden for more than a year, because the rainfall from the Ukraine rained down exactly where we were living. So everything was contaminated. And so there was a pivotal moment in a series of moments. And I'm sure you have experienced moments like that during at least your later adult life.
Yes. So maybe more on the social side rather than the environmental side. I wasn't in any catastrophe like you were. I witnessed from the side the Katrina catastrophe. My brother lived in New Orleans at the time, but it was mostly on the social side. So what happened to the people? And as a matter of fact, I think that really what I care about is people. And I've always cared about people. And when we talk about climate change and about the climate crisis and climate tech and all this climate, we tend to forget that everything is interconnected. And when we speak about climate, we actually speak about people. It's not just the planet. The planet, if humanity is extinct tomorrow, the planet will survive. Actually better. So it's not about the planet, it's about the planet, what happens to us as a species on this planet. So people, and maybe looking at it in retrospect, I've always been involved in my adult life or in my business life around things that have to do with multiculturalism, with the misunderstanding or the bridging between different cultures. I grew up in France. I came to live in Israel when I was young. I've always had friends around the world. I traveled a lot, and I spoke a few languages, which helped me realize that when people speak to each other, they don't necessarily understand each other, even if they speak, all of them speak English. Cultural differences are very strong. And a lot of my world revolved around that. So creating business, managing people that had different ways of doing what they do and trying to bring them in a cohesive way to work together. And it so happened that just before the dot-com bubble burst in the early 2000s, I was managing a startup, and the startup, the whole market was like so booming like crazy. It was crazy. And I remember feeling really uncomfortable with it, really uncomfortable, because not because of the booming. I mean, it's, progress is good and the economic growth is good, but I was seeing societal wrongs that I didn't like, even internally, very young people earning a really huge salary, pampered from head to toe, complaining that their chair wasn't soft enough, or they didn't have a massage in their lunch break, or that was the reality. It was really, really bad. And when it burst, eventually, and anyone who went through this, certainly in management positions, will never forget it. There's so much firing of people and restructuring and rethinking how we do everything. I was approached by one of our Dutch investors, the people from the Baan family, who actually looked at it from, I think, a semi-religious perspective, saying, we think that all of this happened for a reason. And the reason is that there is a disconnect between capital and values. And eventually we lost it. We lost that connection between people and what we care about and making money. And they started thinking, and that I'm talking the early 2000s, 2001, they started thinking about how to bring those back together. And since we were in the technology business of investing in technology companies and building startups, we said, okay, let's do this triangle of technology, capital, and values and bring that together. And they asked me if I wanted to join them and experiment. And that to me was like a gift. All of a sudden, somebody put some order into what I had been feeling without putting words into it. And immediately I said yes. And next day we didn't know what to do because all these nice terms that we have today of venture philanthropy, impact investing, the sustainable development goals, ESG as an opportunity, all these things, they didn't exist. No words, impact measurement, all these things were totally gone. I mean, it was not there. And we started to think about who we are as people and what kind of commercial activities we want to be engaged with. And that, so in retrospect, we did things from venture philanthropy and all the way to impact investing, always connecting these three dots in this triangle. We failed a lot. We also succeeded quite a lot. But what we did, we changed people's paradigms and mindsets. And we initiated a lot of things that eventually took off in different directions, but we did this for the first time and introduced ideas and concepts and supported the setup of this whole industry, the GIN, the definitions of impact, impact fund, all these things. We were there to bring our experience and our knowledge that we had accumulated by that time to help really build that industry. So to me, it was a transition, not like a moment, but more of a transition into thinking, okay, whatever I do with my life, I want to do it in a way that is inclusive, that thinks about people, that considers our planet. How? That's a different question, but somehow it resonated well with maybe my character. And also, if there's one thing that characterizes me, and I'm sure that if you interview my mother, she will tell you that, I'm very stubborn. And when I see a reality I don't like, I want to change it.
I'd love to connect us.
I'm sure you would. And which means that I don't want to be told what to do. And if I need to bang my head against the wall to achieve something that I think is important, I will. I'm not afraid of that.
But I want to go back a little step. When that transition happened, and that is I think that marks the clear transition, going to that family, the Barn?
Barn, yes. It was a Noble Foundation.
You expressed it differently, but they touched something that your heart already knew.
Yeah, probably. They verbalized ideas that probably I felt discomfort with. And when they verbalized them and conceptualized them, it was easy for me to step in.
Okay. And because I ask this way, because I find that many people know in their heart that if something is off, anything, right? It can be about small things, but can also be about big things like the way we organize ourselves as a species. But we somehow know it in our hearts. And the question is about the triggering moment. So in your case, it was somebody giving words to that feeling that fitted you as a personality, but also you with your skill set and experience. Saying, okay, I can apply what I have done in the last years, decades, into something that actually resonates.
Yes, but if you don't cover that with capital, then it's meaningless words. And the fact that they stepped in and said, we believe we need to fix this paradigm and really conceptualize this idea that we now call impact investing with capital to deploy on doing that, that is what makes a difference. Because we all walk around with things we see that are wrong that we'd like to fix, or things we believe we have the power to do something about. But if we don't really have the resources, that can be time, people, knowledge, money, it can be anything, then it's a thought that goes through your head, and then you go on with your daily life. So the fact that they added the function of putting in effort and capital and branding things in different ways and researching and willing to try and fail and retry, that's of huge, huge value.
Yeah. So energy that can be spent on doing something new that you otherwise wouldn't have been able to do, and you wouldn't have been able to do it because it was against any best practice norms, ideas of the time, and actually challenging the status quo in a way, right? Mm-hmm. If you're in a active in a profit-seeking, profit maximization environment, and then all of a sudden you have to you shift your optimization function to a much broader definition of success, a much broader definition of what profit means. It's not only financial profit, it's also other things that you profit or that the world profits from. That requires a systemic perspective on things. And I want to tie that to the people, because you said from the beginning of a conversation, you said that people are at the core of who you are, how you express in the world, right? The relationships between people and I find that it is, and I would like to hear your view on this, because on the one hand, people are very, very good at integrating complex situations in systems, like, for example, families, everyday systems that we have to deal with. We find ways of navigating that. We find ways of reading them. We find we understand intuitively that there are multiple perspectives within, and that we, in order to understand and navigate, we have to take on all of these perspectives. But then that starts failing as we deal with different systems. If we move away from systems that we grew up in, and let's say we go into an organization or we are part of an economy, then this reading ability of systems starts to fail for many people.
Maybe it's not a failure of reading it. Maybe it's just the powerless feeling that you can't do much about it anyway. So why bother? Okay,
then let's go there, because you don't seem to have that powerlessness about you in the face of these complex systems. You stand up and you say, okay, I'm going to do something about this. So if I'm searching for something that somebody could adopt and say, okay, I also, my heart also tells me something is off, and just like the Bahn family gave you the words to say what's off and to start working on it, what could be the words for somebody to activate themselves and go into impact? So what is it that triggers you to do things when you see something's not right in your heart?
So I think, first of all, I guess I'm an entrepreneur by nature. So entrepreneurs are a bunch that likes to change reality to better, or something that better fits what they think should be. So I see a reality or situation and I want to change it. I'll do it. Which in many cases is hard. In most cases, it's very hard. If I could give a word of advice, would be to choose your battles and make sure that you are really putting up your energy to change things that you can change or are within your reach somehow, or even a little bit beyond your reach, but not like, I'm not going to make global peace. Okay, I realize that. So I think a lot of heartache that I had with time were battles that I fought that there was no way I could win. And that's very frustrating. So choose your battles. But still, it's the world cannot be comprised of 100% people that want to change reality. Otherwise, there'll be chaos. So, so the few people who are able to lift, it's like the Münchhausen count, you know, like you lift yourself up from your ponytail.
Yeah, that's what I have this thing for.
Exactly. So it's like a hook. You pick it up and you lift yourself. This is what an entrepreneur does, and because it's a very challenging environment in all respects, and you have to find the motivation and the positiveness, the positivity, the energy, the ability to energize others and motivate others. So I think this is the blessing and the curse of people that have this entrepreneurial mindset where they want to change reality. But everyone can do a little bit. So even people who don't think that they can shift systems, still they can shift what they do in their own life, in their jobs, in their family, in their immediate surroundings. That is doable. Even small things. And when you start with small things that you can change and you take that step and you make a change, it's intoxicating. You want more and you want bigger. And then you want to bring others, sometimes to the extent that you become like a total missionary, which is annoying to others. But still, it works in some cases.
That's interesting, very interesting, because usually or very often in the impact or sustainability fields, growth is frowned upon. And you just described that there's a growth imperative in the sense of doing the right thing. So do you see an economy that is driven by a growth imperative of impact?
Yeah, I didn't frame it that way, but I think so. I think it somehow has to conquer everything else and be integrated in everything else. So it's not a growth, it's not a zero-sum game. Like if you grow here, then you have to diminish there. On the contrary, it's reviewing or relooking at how we see everything we do in reality and reframe it under the premise of what is the influence that we're creating or the impact we're creating both on our planet or on people, and how can we do more of an integration. So then it doesn't become either or, it just wears an additional layer or a new lens.
Okay, and these so we have layers of outcomes. We have interconnectedness between all sorts of actors in a system, and in order to be truly impactful, we need to integrate all of these in order to understand what is our intended and unintended consequences here. How do we deal with this? How do you deal with this so that your head doesn't blow up every time you think about impact? How do you? I have a suspicion that the fact that you had these multicultural experiences and learned to think from multiple perspectives helped you generate that kind of thinking and perspective on the world that allows you now to see bigger pictures.
Yeah, I do see bigger pictures, and the way that I deal with making them happen is that I have a multitude of ideas, because like you said, I see the interconnectedness of things that sometimes others don't see, and I sometimes very clearly see the beginning of the path. I don't know where it's going, but the beginning of the path. But I only have 24 hours a day, and I can't do everything. And even though I try, I can't do that. So what I do is I connect with competent people and I try to infect them with this impact virus and inspire them to take a step, provide them with my backing and assistance and knowledge and whatever is necessary for them to move forward. And if I do it with enough people, enough time, things happen and they change. Sometimes I don't know that it happened, and I just, some years later, somebody comes to me and says, oh, you know, we spoke years ago and here's what I've done, and this is an amazing thing that happened. Sometimes I don't know what happened, maybe nothing happened, but I'm sure I've made a change. I'm sure something happened due to these encouragements. So some people are more operative than others. Some are just taking the ideas and thinking about them and meditating on them, and they change nothing or they change very little. And some are catalysts, so people who are catalyzing change. So I try to speak to a wide variety of people, spread out all kinds of ideas. And I, trust me, I have ideas on things that are really non-related to the core things that I do. And I hope for the best. And in some cases, I'm involved longer term. In some cases, I actually participate actively. In some cases, I just kind of put it out there and let the cosmos take care of carrying the message, and hopefully something good will happen.
But when you see the beginning of a path, do you also have however vague, but like a picture of the goal, of the horizon that this path is leading into?
Just generally, I'm old enough to understand that the goal that I think I see towards and we go towards is probably not what we're really trying to achieve. So I've thought in the past, years ago, I thought that you should have like really clear goals that you can know that you have arrived. It's kind of, there's a saying in the Talmud that says that the path is smarter than the one who walks it. And it's so true. You walk the path and things happen. It's like in the beginning of our conversation, we talked about opportunities and decisions. This is what it is. And sometimes the goal is not what you thought it was. Maybe the goal is somewhere else. Maybe the goal is much bigger, totally different. So if you're going in the right direction with a good heart of doing something that aims to do good with all the tools that you can possibly take, you will probably end up somewhere else. So that's why I said the beginnings of the path. I'm trying to put people on paths and equip them with the necessary knowledge, and also try to show them where the path is, so they don't get confused into 5 different paths at once. So one path at a time. But then I release them. Maybe the biggest lesson that I learned, which I'm learning all the time because I'm not there yet, certainly, is to let go. It's hard to let go.
Let's go to not to being able to let go, but I have one other question first, because you surely, or I know you see more than one path per day, maybe even per hour. How do you choose which paths to follow and which not?
For myself or for others?
Both.
So for others, I don't choose. I just spread them around. And I'm assuming that people will pick up the path that they are most connected with. Every meeting I have, every single meeting I have created a few paths in that meeting. The other person sometimes doesn't know even, but I have lined up a few paths for this person to take, and I'm waiting to see what happens. When I think of myself, it's overwhelming. And I sometimes wish I could do way more than I already do. It's frustrating that I can't just replicate myself and do all kinds of additional things I'd like to do. So it's hard to choose. So I have a few sounding boards. I like to talk to my partner and ask what he thinks about things. I like his very clear view of life. My partners here at Pitango are very good sounding board. Mostly they say, okay, let this one go. not now. Just stop thinking about that, which is very helpful. I speak to my peers. I speak to you, for example. So, and I think out loud, and that mostly it's about disqualifying, saying no, this no. So the ones yes, it's easy. And I always live with this thought that maybe I could have done it differently or chosen another thing to focus my energy on, and it would have given, certainly when things fail, I say, okay, I've just wasted all this time and effort in doing something that really didn't work. I could have chosen a different path, and that would have, but that's how life is.
So there's, you basically operating a little bit like a whale navigates. So you're putting out sound signals and you're catching what comes back. And if some coherent pattern emerges from your sound boards, then you get a picture. Is that roughly right?
Yes and no. On the tactical level, yes. On the strategic level, not so much. On the strategic level, I understand where I'm going. I understand the major issues that I want to focus my time and energy and knowledge on. And within that frame, that's how I navigate. So I'm not going to be doing things that are totally off topic. So my world is the world of impact and technology. So that's like the bigger picture. In that, I'm trying to mainstream impact so that it becomes a second nature to every investor, every startup, every accelerator, every entrepreneur, anyone that is dealing with this combination of innovation, technology innovation, and money, investments around that. And then with that are the smaller building blocks. So what needs to happen in order to make this work? Who do I need to speak with? Who needs to be convinced? How do we frame it? How do I help other funds frame what they need to do in order to get there? What will have the biggest impact? So I basically even almost stopped doing one-on-one meetings because it's just, it's not amplified enough. I need more outreach. So how do I, with minimum effort, get maximum effect? And then build around that. And then it narrows down and down and down and down. And on the tactical level, where to narrow down and what to spend today or tomorrow or this hour or the next hour is like this whale idea that you were talking about. But but I know where I'm swimming. I know the general direction. I know what I'm preaching for. It's just a matter of how to implement it.
And that's exactly where I wanted to go now, because it's a twofold question. So on the one hand, you must have a picture of the world in which you have succeeded with everything you wanted to do. And that world, by definition, looks different from our world now, right? And if you want to go there, I'd love to hear something about that world that you would like to create. And at the same time, you have to let go of that horizon. Otherwise, you will probably jump off the next bridge because you know you cannot reach that ever. So 2 questions. One is, what's the shape of that horizon that you want to create in the world, and how do you let go of it without letting go of it?
So the shape, I'm going to sound like a beauty queen pageant here, but the shape is an inclusive world where we have a safe planet. People considerate and thinking holistically about others with much smaller inequalities with more access to opportunities for everyone around the world, for equality, gender and other equality, where we have no immediate climate risks or even weather risks that kills and really disastrous for so many people. A world where the capital market realizes that good business is good, and then it all aligns behind it, where maximizing profits means more than just money, and then the whole financial market aligns around it, because I believe in the power of the economy to really make that shift. So that's like the world that I see, and I'm not losing sight of it, but I understand that in order for at least part of this to happen, so many things need to happen, and of course, so much time and talent and effort needs to come from so many people, that it's important to inspire these people to be positive, to be optimistic that change can be achieved, and it's up to us. And then each one will do his or her part, and that will weave into each other. So some will do things in a certain domain, certain geography, small, big, it'll all eventually, people will take their role. The challenge is to realize what my role is here and not do some things that I'm maybe less good at or would waste my time that I could use to do something that I'm more successful in. That's a challenge. And just to give you an example, I think in Israel, we don't invest enough in technologies that are developed for emerging markets. I won't go into it right now, but it's to change that system. It's impossible in my idea to change the existing system to fit that. We need to create a new system next to the existing, not instead, next to the existing system that encourages and funds these kinds of companies. And with time and success, it will catch up with the rest of the market. I wish I could do something like that. I would be really seriously interested in setting up a fund like this. But on the other hand, that's not my main goal. So instead, I'm talking about it with everyone I can possibly reach. Government people, entrepreneurs, people who want to set up, and just try to spread, and I hope that somebody will pick it up and do it. And then when that happens, it might not have been part of my pushing at all. It might just come in just because someone else thought about it. I'm not that kind of a genius, but I'll be happy, and I'll try to do whatever I can to really scale that and make that happen. So there are a lot of things that can be done. To me, it's about saying, okay, this needs to be done, but I'm not the person to do it.
Okay, so by detaching yourself, detaching your ego from the achievement, and doing everything you can provide towards making that goal happen, by spreading, by doing whatever is you are strongest at, you trust that you will move the field forward into that future, and you accept that you can only move it that far, right?
But I believe in the ripple effect. I believe people will. It's like a virus. I'm telling you, it's like contagious. People will be doing things which will move other people to do things which move other. I strongly believe that systems move like that. There's I try to focus my time and energy on things that will enrich everyone, including me. I never do any meeting or anything that I will come out of this meeting feel totally drained energetically. I don't want to do these things. Every single activity that I do, I try to make it in a way that will enrich me as well. So that means kind of the tides that will lift all boats. So everyone will come out more energized than we started the meeting.
Good.
That is really important. It's otherwise you're wasting your time. By believing that you can make that change, this is what is enriching you. But if I think the few times where I felt totally drained of energy were, for example, I was invited to speak at the parliament to politicians, and I left this place and I felt like I had, I don't know, left 10 years in that building. So I wouldn't do that again.
Why was that? What created that feeling?
Because I felt that they invited me to tell them things they don't know, but they actually didn't listen to what I told them. And I came with very practical advice. I'm a very practical person. I don't, we can speak philosophy and I love it, but I try to be very specific. And then each one of them needed to speak because they couldn't let their ego go by. So we spent a lot of time on hearing them speak about things that are totally unrelated to the topic of the discussion, because the camera was shooting. So they want to look good for the public. So they wanted to be seen in that particular setup and speak about whatever. So we wasted a lot of time on that. It seemed that none of them actually had any intention of taking these things into the next level. So they didn't catch that virus. They kind of just tossed it right back at me. And it felt like a whole charade. So I was drained of energy getting out of that building, thinking I just wasted, I don't know, a few hours of my life because I believed that by coming here, I would add to this ripple effect that I'm trying to create some top-down activity that can be decided by just the government or the parliament, and things would move in that direction because it would be important. I try to infect them with that optimism and the sense of urgency and real life daily operations they can take. And I felt that I just wasted my time.
But systems, and we're talking about a system here too, the system of impact related activities and people and organizations, systems tend to have tipping points, meaning at one point the system will either collapse or move into a higher state, into a bigger state very, very suddenly. From roughly the last 20 years that you have been active in that field, how would you describe the curve? So might we be approaching a tipping point, or is there still a long way to go?
I think there are several vectors. In the past 20 years, we started with like the idealists, people that had money and were able to put this money to work in things that they believed would do this idea of, let's take my example, technology and impact. And basically try to convince the rest of the world that this would be a profitable experience and that it was feasible. So it was kind of growing little by little. 2008, 2009, the GIN was created. So framing, words, measurement tools, that happened. So that kind of gave a big boost to this impact industry, which was accompanied by a market fallout and people saying, oh, that's nice, but it's not working. So it went up and down. And then it started to rebuild gradually. Then the Sustainable Development Goals came along, which helped frame the world of impact. So that gave another boost and people started to huddle around that and have a common language and start treating it a bit like the 10 commandments or 17 commandments of the impact world. And then, so that also, I think, started expanding. And then it's a sort of a linear growth, which is not tipping point. Then there's another vector, which is the global mainstream VC market, tech market, that had zero interest in impact and ESG, whereas ESG was already very prominent in the capital markets, but not in the private equity or even venture capital markets. And they started just 2-3 years ago to think about the implications of technology, AI, bias, responsible product design, that sort of thing, but very, very slowly. And then, well, it happened here at Bitango 2.5 years ago, where the founders started saying, okay, we are a legacy mainstream venture capital fund. And here we have these impact funds, which are just focused on impact. What if we could integrate these ideas or some of the ideas into our mainstream operations? What would happen then? And that 2 years ago started to scale slowly. And then 1 year ago, people got it. Why? Maybe because young people stepped into funds, maybe because the climate emergency started to become more clear to people. Who knows? That's a different conversation, but something happened about a year ago. And then this market started climbing. And it started, I see it in the Venture ESG group that I'm a member of, founding member of, where we started just 4 or 5 of us thinking about what does ESG or impact mean to mainstream VCs. And now, a year later, we're, 250 or 300 funds that are mainstream funds that are thinking about how to integrate ESG. And when they say ESG, they say it because they don't understand the difference between ESG and impact, and they don't even think that there is a difference. So, so some of them just mean very small things like diversity. Some of them mean going all the way, thinking about the impact of the products of their companies that they invest in. So, and that has risen very fast in the past year. And it's rising faster, going to rise this year, because the regulator stepped in and said, if you are a big fund or a big company in Europe, you are going to have to disclose your carbon emissions and what you're doing about reducing your greenhouse gas emissions. And you're going to have to be accountable for your diversity. And then the SEC in the US is starting to adopt the same thing. So they did that on diversity and inclusion, and just 2 days ago on climate disclosures. So you have that coming in bottom up. The entrepreneurs want it. The investors in the funds are starting, like the new generation, starting to want it. They understand that the clients of these companies are actually people who want this connection. And then the regulator is coming in from above. And it's going to be hard to raise capital if you don't comply with that. So that is leading us all into this tipping point. We're not quite there yet, but it's coming fast.
So you're saying if you want to surf that wave, you better start preparing right now.
Oh, for sure. And it doesn't matter if you're an investor or a startup. Even if you're a 5-people startup, you plan on selling to customers that are regulated. And they will have to regulate their whole supply chain. They will be sending you a questionnaire around your diversity and around your carbon emission. That's the basic, like these 2 pillars are the bare minimum. If you're not prepared now, you will lose these clients. So the convergence between the world of pure impact, where I was for 20 years, thinking about nothing but impact measured, intentional impact, and the world of ESG/impact, which is a bit of a blur still, but it's getting more and more aligned, and people start to understand that you can't have one without the other. That is climbing fast. I think that within this year, next year tops, it will be the avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody will understand it. And I think everybody's understanding it now, but now they're still at the phase where they're saying, okay, so we want to do this, but how do we do it? Who's going to teach us? Where are the resources? Who can help us? Is it difficult? How much resources do we need to put on this? Is it worthwhile? These are open questions, very fair.
Mm-hmm.
Next year, it's going to be about implementation, because people are going to get it. And if we are there to provide the world with the tools, the knowledge, the people, the frameworks, the playbooks, the role models and examples and inspiration, they would adopt it. Mm-hmm. Because the if is not there anymore, it's the how.
So, and the how is made slightly easier with frameworks like the one that's behind you on the wall, or a different framework you mentioned, ESG. Let's go there for a moment and pick apart the difference between ESG and impact, because I'm not sure that everybody really sees what that difference actually means. So that impact could also be a framework that somebody can attach themselves to.
Yeah. So first of all, there is an overlap between ESG and the Sustainable Development Goals. There are a few resources that you can find online. It's really cool to see which SDGs are under the E pillar, S pillar, and G pillar. It's really cool. The simple way to explain it is that ESG is more on the internal side and impact is more on the external side. Mm-hmm. So if you are a corporate company of any size, you should comply with ESG. Now, complying with ESG doesn't mean anything because there's no compliance. There's no proof of ESG compliance anywhere. It's not like you have, the rule of law or some regular or ISO or whatnot. It's not. It's too fragmented yet. There is no one standard that you can adhere to, but the ideas behind the standards are clear. And it's becoming clearer and clearer with the SFDR, with the regulation in Europe and the SEC requirement, that's becoming clearer. And that means, how do you manage yourself? Who are the people you hire? Where do you hire them from? How diverse are you, gender-wise and otherwise? Are you making sure there's no gender pay gap between your employees? How do you take care of your employees' safety, privacy? Working conditions, how do you make sure you're, as an employer in the job market, are inclusive for example, young mothers, all these things, around profit sharing, around spreading the prosperity and allowing more and more people to participate in the game. That's on the S side. On the G side, how do you govern yourself? Are you a registered company? Do you pay your taxes? Do you provide financial reports? Do you have a board? How often do you meet? What's your diversity in your board? What kind of policies do you have in place? How do you implement them? That's on the governance side. Mm-hmm. And on the environmental side, so what is it that you do around your own operational carbon footprint? How do you reduce it? How do you, depends whether you have a material production, so how material the carbon footprint is to your operations. And if you're manufacturing something, it's totally different than if you're a software company. But it all has an implications on how you treat Earth, which is related also to the S part, because how do you convince your employees to come to work with using public transportation and not cars, single-use cars? Or so how do you make that happen? What kind of environmental policy do you apply? How about single-use plastic? What do you do around flying around? So of course we don't stop operations. We need to operate, and that will have a carbon footprint, but let's do it in the best possible way that is as low on our planet as possible. So that's ESG, and that's very internal. And every company and every corporate should have that, because we want to work for companies that are fair, that treat employees well, that have accountability to their products, to the planet, that are thinking about being fair in all their activities. And that's something everyone should have, regardless of where they are. And that's really on the ESG side. And if we look further to SDG or to impact, that's where we look externally. So we look at what is the product of the company and its business model, and how do we actually, can we create a positive impact with our product, and how? Or do we maybe create negative impact? That's also possible. So what's the trade-off? Where's the net impact that we create? And you'd be surprised to know that, of course, there's a segment of impact tech companies, which are my previous life in impact, which is where impact funds invest. But there's a whole segment of companies that were maybe not born out of impact, but actually their product has a very significant impact. And if you are able to understand that, aggregate that, or connect that with your product offering, understanding who your stakeholders are, how do you best serve them, how your product outcomes are connected with the Sustainable Development Goals, and how do you measure that, increase it within your business model, so it's not decoupled from the business, and continuously progress and improve, then you also make a positive impact on the world. So these are like the basic definitions or differences between ESG and SDG. I personally believe that the world of impact investing that has focused only on the Sustainable Development Goals has missed a lot by not looking at ESG. Because even if you have a company that has an amazing positive impact, but has a toxic environment that abuses women, that doesn't make sense, right? So you have to apply ESG to all the SDG companies. That's a given. It's not happening right now. It's a world that needs to still converge. On the other side of ESG, so if you're stopping at just saying, okay, we only care about what happens in the company, we don't care what the product actually does, that can be an investment thesis, which is acceptable. I wouldn't want to work for a fund like this. I would actually want to work for a fund that says, okay, let's not stop there. If the company really doesn't have an impact, we're not going to make any social wash here. We're not going to invent the impact of a company just because we want to. So 30% of the companies in a mainstream portfolio like Pitango will not have an impact. So ESG will be excellent, good enough. They will manage themselves in the best possible way. That's fine. But then 70% of the companies will have an impact because they already do. And the only thing to do now is to identify it, make sure that it's intentional, that it's weaved into the product offering, tracked, and improved. And then all of a sudden you say, okay, so I'm not just doing ESG. I'm just thinking widely about these companies that I'm funding, and I'm giving them something more than just how they manage themselves. And I think this is where we should be going.
And that again ties back into the more holistic perspective, because
to me, yes.
Yeah. In getting towards a closing, I would like to ask about the favorite or the one advice you would like to give and who you would like to give it to. So what's the most important advice you would like to give to whom in the world? It could be anything between a 15-year-old deciding what to do with her life, all the way to General Secretary of the UN, Elon Musk, Putin, whoever. Who would you give what advice to if you could give one advice that is world-changing?
That's certainly not a question that I can answer off the top of my head. I'm trying to think
it's an unfair
what
question,
would be,
so.
yes, it's unfair because it's a serious question and it needs consideration. I would try to think where is, like I said, the minimum effort for maximum impact that can be done, right?
Yeah.
We want to try to maximize the impact that we can with an action that will not take 30 years. So one person bottom up will not do that. So I have plenty of advice to give to 15-year-olds, for sure.
I'm sure.
I have plenty of advice to give to young women, young entrepreneurs, things that I wish somebody had told me. Plenty of advice for people.
We can go there. We can go there later if you.
Later maybe, but I think that if we want to have this more of a tipping point, we need people with a lot of influence. So maybe I would say, let's take the leading VCs, okay? Still staying in my world. The leading VCs who have not yet made any real statements around impact and ESG. And have them take a stand saying, like Larry Fink has, okay, in his home, in his domain. Say something like that. Say something like, we care about people and planet. We will integrate these considerations into our investment process, which means we will stop investing in harmful technologies. We will focus on technologies that at least have good ESG, but potentially will also do good. And we will deliver that message to all the entrepreneurs that approach us. And if they want to have our money, they will need to have those things in place. So like amplify what we did with Pitango, which is it's a very big fund in Israel. It's a $3 billion fund, but it's for, if you look at it from the global perspective, it's still very small. So to take somebody like that and say, okay, this is what you need to do. This is a person that needs to be in your team to execute that and build this strategy and execute it to make it serious. And then that will push the tipping point faster and further.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
In closing, what would you like to say to the young female entrepreneur or person in general? Because you opened that. Yeah.
So I'm a very strong advocate of empowering women and in tech, in entrepreneurship, in anything really. First of all, don't try to be a man. Sometimes, I think that's gone already from the world, but in the past, women thought they could only succeed if they acted like men. And we make lousy men. I mean, and the ones who manage to behave like men become terrible people. I think it was Madeleine Albright that said that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. So yeah, we have our own very unique qualities that are good qualities. Let's keep them. Let's not try to be men. Be bold, believe in yourself. Make sure, first of all, understand that for any job, for example, that is job opening that is out there that you want to compete for, you don't need to comply with 100% of the requirements to apply, because men with 30% of the requirements will apply and they will get a job. And if you don't apply because you don't comply with 100%, you'll never even be considered. So don't be afraid. Take your own path with confidence. Network. Find people in the world that will help you in a very curated network. Not just, don't waste your time going to 100 meetups with people that will not help you. Think about the people you want or you need in your life to help you. Ask them for something specific. Everyone will be happy to do so. If I will be happy to help anyone if I don't have to work doing it. So if you want me to help you, send me the blurb you want me to send to the person you think I know that will be the person you want to read. That will, in one click. If I have to spend more time on that, I won't be able to do it. Help me help you. And like me, there's hundreds of thousands of people that are very much willing to help, but they need help. Focus. Don't give up your family or other aspirations because you want to have a great job. It's possible.
Just as a note, how many children do you have?
I have 4 daughters.
Okay, it works.
And 3 grandsons. But I will tell them the same thing. We're raising feminist boys in our family. And just find mentors, people that can give you a hand. Sometimes it's for 5 minutes, sometimes it's a lifetime. So it depends. Find people you can trust and ask questions. Don't be afraid. We are important, and we need to be considered and heard. And if you want to sit at the table, you have to take it.
Wow, thank you. That was really good. Thank you, Cecile, for standing up and doing the first of the Journey to Impact conversations that we do here with Gita.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for initiating this and asking these tough questions.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not.
No, I hope it had value. And, maybe if we redid this conversation, I would have different answers. Who knows?
The answers create the value.